On this episode of Peak, 10 ways you'll be amazed by Neanderthals. Over the last 30 years, advancements in genetics have revolutionized numerous scientific fields, chief among them anthropology and archaeology. Prior to the 1990s, it was nearly impossible to conclusively identify human, animal, and plant remains that lacked defining characteristics. A tiny worn-down bone fragment found under layers of earth might belong to one of 1,000 different animals. This left question marks over so many discoveries, mysteries left unsolved for decades, even centuries, as specimens collected dust. Then came DNA analysis. Suddenly, discoveries from around the world, collections from every museum, the remains of humans, animals, and plants from hundreds, thousands, even millions of years ago could now be DNA sequenced, providing long-awaited answers about species, sex, certain physical characteristics, genetic diseases or conditions, ancestry, migration patterns, and more. If you've wondered why so many amazing discoveries have been made in recent decades, this is why. Today, as more and more specimens are analyzed and new evidence comes to light, our understanding of so many species is changing. This is especially true when it comes to our closest relatives, Neanderthals. Gone is the old-fashioned view of grunting, primitive, dim-witted brutes. A more informed picture has emerged of a people much closer to ourselves than we realized. More intelligent, sophisticated, cultured, and even caring than we'd ever known. Here are 10 evidence-based insights that'll have you viewing Neanderthals in a whole new light. Number 1. Neanderthals were manufacturing glue 200,000 years ago. In 2001, in a clay pit in the Campitello quarry in Italy, researchers uncovered 3 stone flakes. Found among ancient elephant and rodent bones, the flakes were high-quality flint, made skillfully with a centripetal flaking technique. A black organic material was present on 2 of the flakes, with 1 flake half-coated in the material. Dating of the bones revealed the layer's contents were over 191,000 years old. Testing of the flakes confirmed that the black material applied to their surfaces was birch bark tar. Birch bark tar, also called birch pitch, is a substance derived from the bark of birch trees. While scientists still do not know the exact techniques used by ancient people, here is the basic process. Bark is harvested from the tree and heated using fire. As the bark burns, it releases small amounts of resin that accumulate and can be collected. The process is repeated until a sufficient amount of pitch has been produced. The finished product is balled into a sticky wad, similar to modern chewing gum. Birch bark tar is the first form of glue ever recorded. Neanderthals used birch tar to make tools, for example, adhering a flint spear point to the end of a wooden shaft, or an axe head onto a bone handle. In some instances, the tar itself was the handle, providing extra grip to a sharp, slippery stone flake. While the Campitello flakes are the oldest known examples of Neanderthals using birch pitch, it has been found in several other confirmed Neanderthal excavations. 1 tar-coated flake was found at the Zandmotor site in the Netherlands, dated to 50,000 years old. 2 lumps of birch tar were found at the Königsau site in Germany, dated to 43,000 and 48,000 years old. 1 lump bore the impression of a wooden handle. The other bore a fingerprint, likely of its maker. Königsau was a lakeside hunting camp from which Neanderthals hunted mammoth, woolly rhino, red deer, reindeer, and horses. Amazingly, birch bark glue wasn't the only adhesive Neanderthals manufactured. The Sant'Agostino cave site in Italy yielded 5 flint scrapers and 1 lava wall flake coated with pine tree resin. While easier to harvest and produce than birch tar, dried pine resin still had to be warmed to make an effective glue. It was also less durable than birch tar. The Fassalone cave site in Italy yielded 2 flint scrapers and 1 quartzite flake coated with pine resin, as well as a flint scraper coated with pine resin and beeswax. Studies show that adding beeswax to the pine resin made it nearly as tough and durable as birch pitch. This was a clever substitution in regions that lacked birch trees but had plenty of bees and pine trees. In Syria, The El Talel and Humal sites uncovered 14 stone artifacts coated with bitumen, an oily black viscous form of petroleum used as an ancient tool adhesive, likely by Neanderthals. Evidence shows that the tool makers, making their goods between 50 and 80,000 years ago, heated the bitumen to make the thick liquid easier to apply. It's even possible that Neanderthals taught us, Homo sapiens, how to make glue, though we'll never know for sure. What we do know is that Homo sapiens were making their own birch bark tar many years later. Excavations in Sweden and Denmark uncovered birch tar lumps manufactured by Homo sapiens, dated to 10,000 and 6,000 years ago. DNA was recovered from both sets and revealed some amazing details. Watch my 10,000-year-old gum episode to learn more. Number 2. Neanderthals explored a just erupted volcano and left prints in the cooling ash. Rising up out of a lush valley in the Campania region of southern Italy, the volcano of Roccamonfina has always drawn attention. Known as the neighbor of Vesuvius, Roccamonfina was active for 600,000 years, repeatedly transforming the surrounding landscape, even permanently diverting the course of 2 rivers. The volcano has now been extinct for 50,000 years, but it isn't done shaking things up. Sometime in the late 18th century, on the northeastern slope of the volcano, an astounding sight was uncovered. Layers of volcanic ash had eroded away and revealed numerous ancient footprints sunken into solid rock. Many of the locals were alarmed at the sight. No man could walk through lava unharmed. They could only be the footprints of the devil. Since that time, the site has been known as Ciampate del Diavolo, or Devil's Trails. The first in-depth scientific analysis of the site took place in 2001, led by Paolo Miotto of the University of Padua. Subsequent surveys, tests, and studies have revealed even more details, and analysis is ongoing. Here is what the research has uncovered so far. At a point approximately 349,000 years ago, the volcano of Roccamonfina began to erupt. Shortly after the eruption, 5 different individuals traversed the steep northeastern slope of the volcano. The ground they crossed was not covered with lava, but volcanic ash, deposited on the slope and surrounding areas through pyroclastic flows, a mix of hot gas and volcanic debris that flows along the ground away from a volcano at between 30 and 190 miles an hour, and at temperatures of up to 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Luckily for them, the visitors arrived on the slope after the pyroclastic flows, and at a time when the ash had cooled enough and was safe for them to walk through. Experts say this cooling period varies between a few hours after eruption up to a few days. The 5 individuals took 5 different paths, so they may have visited the slope together as a group or as separate parties at different times. We can't know for sure. It seems likely that 2 of the visitors, let's call them Person A and Person B, inspected the area together, as their paths are both oriented toward the southeast and both descended the 45-degree slope, reminiscent of venturing down a muddy hill with a buddy. Person A tackles the steep ash-covered slope by zigzagging downward. His or her footprints left a wide Z pattern on the hillside. Person B takes the straight-line approach, only to slip on the soft ash. You can see his footprint sliding and stopping. Person B then uses his or her left hand and other body parts in an attempt to regain his balance and remain upright. Researchers identified 3 imprints from Person B's left hand, including a partial handprint, 2 imprints from his calves, 1 imprint from his ankle, and 1 imprint likely from his butt. Yep, we have an ancient Neanderthal butt print. What we don't know is if Person A was cracking up over his friend's spill down the hill. Researchers also located 3 other paths. Person C, who left 13 footprints moving southeast down the slope, but at a lower point on the hill. Person E, who left 4 footprints moving west and in the opposite direction of the other paths. And Person P1, who left 4 footprints along the crest of the slope. Other hominin footprints may be present, but not yet discovered or visible. Research is ongoing. Dated to 349,000 years old, the impressions at Roccamonfina are some of the oldest known footprints of the genus Homo on the planet. Analysis of the footprints show a relaxed gait. In other words, the visitors were not running away or even walking at a fast pace. All known hominin footprints at the site, 74 in total, show a foot morphology that perfectly corresponds with evidence in the Atapuerca Cima de los Huesos archaeological site in Spain, meaning that the visitors who left their mark on Roca Fina were most likely Neanderthals. The gait and other body part impressions also support this, indicating a pelvic structure like Homo sapiens. The visitors were clearly habitual bipeds who could navigate varying terrain and adjust their movements for balance and safety while walking on 2 feet. The larger dimensions of the footprints of person E indicate that he or she is probably an adult, and the other individuals may be younger people, possibly teenagers, or they could simply be adults of smaller stature. The tracks also give clues on the Neanderthal's cognitive abilities. Person A displays awareness of the physical properties of his or her surroundings, the thick, soft, slippery ash, the 45-degree incline, and appears to choose a cautious strategy for descent, zigzagging down the slope. Animal prints are also visible at the site. Preliminary studies suggest the presence of ancient deer, horse, and bear prints. Over time, the ash layers on the volcanic slope lithified, or became solid rock, forming a substance called tuff. This process preserved our visitors' footprints in the rock as we see them today. Interestingly, another pyroclastic flow, occurring within a few months or years after this layer, helped to further preserve the footprints by completely covering them up. Then erosion, over hundreds of thousands of years, chipped away at this protective layer, and not until the 18th century was the footprint layer revealed. So, what motivated these 5 Neanderthals to take a trek up a just erupted, still simmering volcano? Some experts say stones. Volcanic rock has been used by hominins to make tools for over 1 million years. A stone tool, specifically a basalt core, was found on the same layer as the Devil's Trails prints, but unfortunately it could not be definitively tied to the group. Either way, it was most likely curiosity bringing these ancient visitors to Roca Fina. If they were able to reach the volcano within hours or days of the eruption, they were probably close enough to witness it, whether from near or far. Perhaps they watched the once-in-a-lifetime event, waited for things to calm down, and then ran over to check it out. Remember, they might be teenagers. We could be looking at the first geology club in human history. Number 3. Neanderthals supported and cared for their injured, disabled, and elderly. So far, the remains of over 400 individual Neanderthals have been unearthed. That number will likely rise as more fossils are tested and classified. And, odds are, there are lots of Neanderthals still lying happily undiscovered in Europe and parts of Asia. Of the 400-plus individual Neanderthals we have exhumed, some are just a single bone or tooth, some are partial skeletons, and some are near-complete skeletons. Naturally, every tooth and bone has been subjected to rigorous examination and testing by experts of every stripe, including medical professionals, and what they've found sheds new light on Neanderthal social relationships. Obviously, life 100,000 years ago was painfully tough. Hunting and gathering for every meal, traveling hundreds of miles on foot over rugged terrain in all kinds of weather, crude shelters, rudimentary clothing and foot coverings, attacks from formidable predators like big cats and bears, technology with sticks, stones, and fire, and all during an ice age. With such a grueling existence, it's not surprising that Neanderthal bones and teeth show a lot of wear and tear. What is surprising is the healing they show. A significant number of Neanderthals show evidence of serious life-threatening injuries that they recovered from. Blunt force trauma, fractured skulls, broken bones, penetrating injuries, joint damage, severe lacerations, and raging wound infections that they survived, going on to live many years, even decades after the injury. Minor wounds can often be self-treated, but life-threatening injuries like these require immediate help from others, as well as prolonged care to survive and heal. A person who is unconscious or unable to walk or move cannot escape predators, collect water, gather food, maintain body temperature, etc. Signs of healing and recovery on fossils tell us that other members of their group helped them with these things and kept helping them until they no longer needed it. 2 Neanderthals from the La Ferricie site in France, a 50-year-old male and an adult female, show healed fractures in their legs. The male suffered a break in his right femur, while the female had fractures in her right tibia and fibula. Though their injuries rendered them unable to walk, they were clearly not abandoned by their group and were supported by others until they fully healed. Evidence shows that many individuals who were permanently disabled by their injuries were provisioned and protected by other members until their deaths. A male between 40 and 60 years old from the La Chapelle-aux-Saints site in France displayed many ailments, among them severe degeneration of the spine with herniated discs, and degeneration, osteomyelitis, and an abscess in his left acetabulum, or hip socket. These conditions would have made walking, even moving, excruciating. He'd also lost most of his teeth, which would have made chewing difficult. It seems likely that someone processed his food for him. Another remarkable example is Shanidar 1, a nearly complete Neanderthal skeleton dated to between 45 and 70,000 years old, discovered in the Shanidar cave in northern Iraq. Aged between 35 and 50 when he died, Shanidar 1 lived a very hard life. His skeleton was a catalog of injuries from head to toe. As a younger man, he'd received a violent blow to the face, badly wounding his scalp and crushing the lateral side of his left orbit. The injury healed but left him completely blind or with minimal sight in his left eye for much of his adult life. At some point, Shanidar 1 also lost his hearing. His skull shows advanced external auditory exostosis in both ears, dense bony growths protruding into the ear canals and causing conductive hearing loss. His right humerus had been fractured in multiple places, and his lower arm and hand were lost, whether in the initial injury, in an amputation, or naturally as the wounds healed. Nerve injuries caused paralysis and atrophy, and his right arm became shriveled and useless. His right clavicle was softened in places from a soft tissue injury and healed infection. Trauma to his right leg and foot fractured his fifth metatarsal and caused permanent abnormalities to the right foot, even after healing. Use of his right foot was clearly painful, as his left leg showed significant curvature from overcompensating for his weak and painful right side. As if Shanidar 1's suffering wasn't enough, he also had advanced degenerative joint disease and hyperostotic disease. Partially blind, mostly deaf, with a useless right arm and deformed, painful right foot, Shanidar 1 had limited mobility and gravely diminished perceptual abilities. Yet he reached advanced age in a perilous time. Clearly, he had support and care from his group for years, maybe even decades, being provided food and water, protection, shelter, clothing, and other goods he could no longer make for himself. Accommodations were likely made for his impaired walking ability. Some experts even think he was given assistance with the removal of his right hand, saying that the sharp point caused by a distal fracture in his humerus is evidence of amputation. If true, this would be the first recorded surgery. We'll never know how Shanidar 1 lost his hand, but it's interesting to consider. What we do know is that he was supported and cared for. While Shanidar 1 is an extreme example, there are so many similar stories across the Neanderthal fossil record. Naturally, many of the Neanderthal specimens also show evidence of disease. An individual referred to as Feldhofer Neanderthal 1 showed a breakdown in facial bone due to chronic sinusitis and had evidence of a facial tumor. Regardless, he kept on chugging and lived to be over 50. Advanced dental disease and abscesses are common among the specimens. Tooth decay, gum disease, and broken teeth caused excruciating infections that sometimes spread to the bone marrow of the jaw or even the entire system. Even today, these infections can be fatal without antibiotic treatment. Surviving such miseries in the Middle Paleolithic is impressive. A large number of Neanderthal specimens display external auditory exostoses, like our old buddy Shanidar 1. As mentioned earlier, the condition causes dense bony growths to protrude into the ear canal. The condition, also referred to as surfer's ear, is caused by habitual exposure to cold water and still afflicts people today. A recent study of 23 Neanderthal individuals showed that half of them suffered from surfer's ear, likely from harvesting food and other resources from the water. With continued cold water exposure, the condition would progress to total irreversible hearing loss. The crippling spinal and hip degeneration suffered by the 40 to 60-year-old male of La Chapelle-aux-Saints was likely caused by brucellosis, a progressive deadly bacterial infection acquired through eating raw meat. The environment was also a factor in Neanderthal health. 2 children from Péray, France, dated to 250,000 years old, display the earliest known case of lead exposure, either from contaminated water or food, or breathing in lead-laced smoke from a fire. Tellingly, there are 2 lead mines within 20 miles of the excavation site. And just like Homo sapiens, some Neanderthals were born with debilitating conditions, such as scoliosis and joint deformities. The cranium of a Neanderthal child discovered in the Cima de los Huesos site in Spain displayed a birth defect known as craniosynostosis. This condition causes the sutures between a baby's skull bones to fuse prematurely, before the brain is fully formed. Despite the fusing of the skull, the brain continues to grow as normal, elevating the intracranial pressure and altering the natural shape of the head. Without surgical intervention, most children experience brain damage and diminished intelligence. Despite his or her atypical appearance and intellectual difficulties, the Cima de los Huesos child was kept and well cared for until his or her death at around 12 years of age. Inbreeding among some Neanderthal populations also caused an increased number of congenital abnormalities. A family of 13 Neanderthals from the El Cedron excavation site in Spain show a total of 17 different congenital abnormalities, some causing disabilities. Other individuals became disabled due to degeneration of their joints and spine from hard living. Degenerative joint disease was very common, even for Neanderthals in their late 20s. These diseases, among many, made surviving a savage world even tougher. Yet these people persevered. How? By supporting each other, it seems. Since only bones remain, it's impossible to know what organ and soft tissue injuries and illnesses afflicted these individuals. We can only judge based on those that impacted the skeleton. But the bones make a compelling case for care. So, did this care extend beyond protection, shelter, food, and water? Could it even be called health care? Maybe. While we don't have any concrete evidence of Neanderthal healthcare practices, given our new understanding of their intelligence and abilities, is it inconceivable that Neanderthals may have tried to staunch blood flow, bandage a wound, splint an injured limb, remove a foreign object, or assist with births? What about medicine? Well, there seems to be some evidence for Neanderthal pharmacology. In a series of studies, researchers analyzed the dental calculus of a Neanderthal teenager unearthed from the El Cedron cave in Spain. The dental calculus, also known as tartar, dated between 42 and 50,000 years old and was the oldest plaque to be genetically examined. The sample showed compounds from 2 plants, yarrow and chamomile, as well as poplar, a tree in the willow family. Yarrow and chamomile are rarely eaten for pleasure or sustenance, as they lack nutritional value and taste bitter. Because many toxic plants are bitter, Homo sapiens and some animals have evolved special bitter taste receptor genes called T2R that give us extra sensitivity to bitterness, making us even better at avoiding toxic plants. These genes have also been found in Neanderthals. So, this individual was either taking a risk eating mysterious bitter plants, or he knew what they were, and possibly what they were for. As for the poplar tree, its components can be eaten, but it's typically only in survival situations, as they aren't particularly nutrient-rich or pleasant to eat. Poplar bark, buds, and leaves can be chewed, or the sap consumed. So, if Neanderthals weren't eating these plants for dinner, what were they chewing them for? Possibly for medicinal reasons. These 3 plants have a very long history as medicines. Yarrow was used by Native Americans as an analgesic. They chewed it for toothaches, made infusions for earaches, inhaled it for headaches, and consumed it as a sleep aid. Yarrow is even used today in traditional medicine as an astringent and mild laxative. Chamomile has been used for medicinal purposes for thousands of years. Egyptians revered the herb for its healing properties, and even feature it in hieroglyphics. Greek physicians used chamomile to treat fevers and, quote, female disorders. Since the 1st century AD, the plant has been used to treat digestive problems and ease anxiety. Modern research suggests that chamomile helps with diarrhea, anxiety, and insomnia. Poplar is a type of willow, a family of trees that produce salicylic acid in abundance. Salicylic acid has been used medicinally for over 4,000 years, with its first recorded use noted by Sumerians on clay tablets. Ancient Mesopotamians used the acid to treat pain, inflammation, and fever. It was used in ancient China to treat rheumatic fever and colds. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, prescribed willow tree bark for pain, especially in childbirth. To this day, salicylic acid is still in use as the active ingredient in aspirin. Could it be possible that these plants were used as medications even longer than we thought? From thousands of years to tens of thousands of years ago? The remains of the El Sidron teenager make a compelling case. Not only was he suffering from a dental abscess, an excruciating and life-threatening tooth infection, he was also afflicted with a diarrhea-causing intestinal parasite. DNA analysis of the calculus also revealed the parasite's DNA. Whether the teenager was self-medicating or not, I hope the plants provided him with relief, because sometime later he was dead, likely killed and eaten by cannibals. Yep. But hey, he gave the cannibals a parasite, right? So last laugh. On a lighter note, there's also evidence Neanderthals practiced crude dentistry. One such case is a 130,000-year-old Neanderthal uncovered near Krapina in Croatia. Tormented by an impacted molar, he or she used an implement to frequently prod the sore tooth, cracking the enamel and leaving scratches and gouges on it and surrounding teeth. Considering available materials, toothpicking implements were likely wood or bone. Another individual, hailing from the El Sidron cave in Spain, possessed the telltale picking signs in 2 teeth. Amazingly, a conifer wood fragment was found embedded in the dental calculus of a tooth right next to another pick-damaged tooth. The aggressive picking primarily occurred on infected, impacted, or broken teeth, not because a hunk of mammoth meat was stuck between their teeth. It's possible the pickers were trying to loosen or dislodge the sore tooth, or they were simply trying to ease the pain somehow. It's likely they were performing the actions themselves, but it's possible they could have enlisted help from others. The evidence is clear. Many Neanderthals supported and sustained each other, often throughout life. But why? For evolutionary reasons? Collaboration and trust do increase a group's chances of survival. For reciprocity? If I help you when you're injured, you'll help me when I am. If I help old members of the group, someone will help me when I'm old. These are all likely true. Experts have many theories. But I think it's also something else. Love, kindness, compassion. Neanderthals lived in small groups, between 10 and 30 people. Genetic analysis shows that many of the members were related. These people are your family, your friends. Why couldn't Neanderthals, who are more like us than we thought, have the same motivations we do? Number 4. Most Neanderthals were right-handed. Today, just over 90% of all people on the planet are right-handed. This percentage makes Homo sapiens unique in the animal kingdom. Several animals, including other great apes, cats, dogs, parrots, and even toads, have a preferred hand or foot, but the percentage of right-handers doesn't appear to be nearly as high as Homo sapiens. But studies now show that between 80 and 90% of Neanderthals were also right-handed. A 2019 study focused on handedness in ancient tools. Researchers examined an assemblage of 120,000-year-old Neanderthal stone tools from Germany. They found distinct differences in tool shapes and features that indicated hand preferences. Shapes that fit better in a particular hand, grips designed for a particular hand, a smooth side and a sharp side oriented for safety in a particular hand, etc. Some were reminiscent of modern tool design for righties and lefties. The tools were most likely manufactured by the person intending to use them and customized for his or her preference. The study found that at least 85% of tools were made for right-handers. Some appear to have been made and then modified for left-handers, not unlike today where lefties have to adjust to a righty-centric world. Another study focused on Neanderthal biceps. Researchers examined the remains of Neanderthals still possessing both their right and left humeri, or upper arm bones. They noted pronounced asymmetry in the bones, with one humerus being thicker, heavier, and longer than the opposite bone, and slightly differing in shape. These differences are the result of more muscle development in the preferred side. In 76% of the Neanderthals examined, the right humerus was the larger of the two, indicating their preferred hand. This asymmetry exists in modern humans as well, since we have a preferred hand and that side is usually bigger and more developed. For example, if you're right-handed, your right arm is a little beefier and stronger than your left because you use it more. Most modern humans have between 4 and 13% asymmetry between their right and left sides. Researchers discovered that the asymmetry is over 50% in Neanderthals. This means that Neanderthals' preferred hand and arm is typically 50% stronger and bigger than the other side. Today, this level of asymmetry is only seen in tennis and baseball players. Initially, researchers attributed Neanderthals' Hulk arm to spear throwing or thrusting. However, experiments proved that throwing and thrusting spears built muscle on the opposite side of the body from the throwing arm. Further experiments pinpointed the activity that likely built so much muscle: scraping animal hides. Harvested from their main food source, animal hides were one of the best materials available to hominins for hundreds of thousands of years. Neanderthal tool collections include hide scraping and leather working tools, nearly identical to tools professionals use today. Neanderthals likely processed a lot of animal hide, so much so that it was a frequent group activity. Studies of Inuit and African hunters show the average time to process a single hide is 8 hours. Most Neanderthals lived in cold climates and needed substantial clothing and foot coverings year-round for every member of the group. They likely also used leather for cordage, bags, mats, bedrolls, cooking vessels, and shelter flaps. The third piece of evidence comes from studies examining front teeth. Evidence shows that Neanderthals frequently used their mouths as a third hand, likely for carrying items, preparing hides, etc. Analysis of Neanderthal front teeth revealed numerous microscopic scratches, all in the same angle and running in the same direction. Similar evidence in more recent human populations led researchers to conclude that the scratches were made while processing meat for consumption. The individual would hold a strip of meat between their teeth, use one hand to hold the other end taut, and cut the meat with their dominant hand. Sometimes during the process, the individual's hand would slip, and the stone knife would scratch their front teeth, leaving many scratches over time. Researchers noted that the angle and direction of the scratches corresponded with the angle of the hand doing the slicing. A majority of Neanderthal front teeth scratches of this type correspond with right hand motions, around 89%. Given the number of right-handers in Neanderthal society, it's a surprise that one of the few known Neanderthal works of art, a stencil done in red ochre in the Montevideo cave in Spain, is of a left hand. Were Neanderthals giving lefties their day in the sun? Or was the painter using his dominant right hand to stencil his left? Sadly, we'll never know. Number 5. Neanderthal diets were surprisingly diverse. What you call the paleo diet, Neanderthals just called food. As hunter-gatherers, the quantity and type of food Neanderthals ate depended upon region, habitat, season, weather, tools, physical and intellectual abilities of the group, and more. Subject to these conditions, some Neanderthals ate mostly meat, some ate mostly plants and fungi, and some ate a more balanced combination. Eating what was available to them at a given time and place, Neanderthal life was a cycle of feast and famine. Many Neanderthals displayed enamel hypoplasia, where grooves form on the teeth while they are still developing. It occurs in children born to women malnourished while pregnant and children who experienced malnourishment during infancy. However, some individuals had no signs of malnourishment, so it wasn't universal. Hunting and gathering seems very limited, but you'd be surprised at just how much these ancient people procured from the land, sky, rivers, and seas. Let's begin with the obvious: meat. Fossils and dental calculus DNA show that Neanderthals feasted on reindeer, red deer, mammoth, wild boar, horse, ibex, aurochs, which is an ancient cow, straight-tusked elephant, woolly and grassland rhinoceros, wild sheep, wild goat, beaver, tortoise, marmot, and rabbit. They also ate predators such as cave and brown bear, hyena, wolf, cat, fox, and lynx. A butchered lion and leopard are also present in the fossil record. Excavations of the Shanidar cave in Iraq shows Neanderthals of that region frequently dined on land snails. As for birds, fossils show that Neanderthals ate over 150 different bird species, including quail, grouse, ptarmigan, duck, goose, swan, vulture, owl, kestrel, kite, lark, woodcock, magpie, auk, gannet, and rock dove, an ancestor of today's city pigeons. At 75 different excavation sites, the remains of large-bodied raptors were found, primarily white-tailed eagles and golden eagles. However, it seems as though the Neanderthals weren't interested in them for food. A majority of the eagle fossils found were wing bones and talons. There was a similar wing overrepresentation with corvids, a bird family that includes crows, ravens, jays, and choughs. Scrape marks on the wing bones suggest that Neanderthals harvested the feathers from eagle and corvid wings. Eagle talons, which had been carefully detached from foot bones and polished, may have been made into jewelry. 8 polished white-tailed eagle talons were unearthed at the Krapina Neanderthal site in Croatia. They date to approximately 130,000 years ago and feature notches in the same place on each talon, possibly indicating assembly on a necklace. Some experts have proposed an ancient eagle-revering religion, like some Homo sapien cultures later practiced. Whatever the reason, Neanderthals' fascination with eagle talons began over 130,000 years ago and lasted until 45,000 years ago. Neanderthals also harvested seafood, especially so on the Iberian, Italian, and Peloponnesian peninsulas. Bone and shell fossils show them eating freshwater fish, including trout, chub, eel, perch, and salmon. From the sea, Neanderthals plucked crab, bream, sea urchins, mussels, limpets, clams, oysters, scallops, whelk, cockles, periwinkles, cowrie, and topshells. Some shells in the fossil record show evidence of being closed when harvested from the sea, then placed on a fire where they opened and could then be eaten easily. From shallow pools, Neanderthals harvested a variety of small fish. Amazingly, fossils show they also ate dolphin, monk seal, and bluefin tuna. These were likely acquired through scavenging or stranding. Experts point to the rib cage of Neanderthals, which is wider than ours, as evidence that meat-heavy diets impacted their livers and kidneys. They may have evolved larger livers and kidneys to process a percentage of protein that is deadly to humans, a diet that is over 40% protein. Today, Arctic populations such as the Inuit, who consume meat-dominant diets, have longer ribs and larger kidneys than most Europeans. But even if Neanderthals were equipped with a body for high-protein diets, they couldn't live on meat alone, and probably wouldn't want to. Sometimes you want a salad. Through analysis of ash from ancient hearths, residue on stone tools, and dental calculus, we discovered that plants and mushrooms were also important Neanderthal fare. In fact, the dental calculus of Neanderthals from Cueva del Citron, Spain, showed a completely meatless diet. Neanderthals chowed down on mushrooms, edible grass, moss, nuts including acorn, pistachio, almond, walnut, hazelnut, and pine nut, fruits including fig, palm, date, grape, and wild olive, tubers such as nutgrass, wild radish, and bulbous barley, seeds including mustard, lime tree, and grass, legumes such as peas, lentils, and fava beans, berries including sloe, cornel, and hackberry, and water lily root. Shanidar III, a 40 to 50-year-old male discovered in the Shanidar cave in Iraq, provided some informative dental calculus. Before his death, he had eaten date palms, plants from the pea and lentil family, and unidentifiable roots or tubers. Stone tools found in the same layer as Shanidar III's remains also showed residue from that last meal, as well as residue from seeds, nuts, fruit, fungi, and grasses. I hope that Shanidar III enjoyed that meal because not long after, he died of a stab wound to the chest. Amazingly, in 2015, the Shanidar cave also yielded a 70,000-year-old charred food fragment, which analysis revealed to be an aggregate of legume and grass seeds that had been soaked and pounded together, then charred. Regarding dairy, milk was technically available to Neanderthals through the hunting of lactating female mammals such as horses, aurochs, bison, and mammoth, but seems unlikely, especially given the fact that some adult Neanderthals were lactose intolerant, as DNA revealed. Neanderthal kids were a different story. Infant and child remains show that Neanderthal children were breastfed until age 3, so milk wasn't completely off the menu. What about food preparation? First, let's discuss fire. There is still debate among experts whether Neanderthals could make fire on their own or simply collect naturally occurring fire. It's also possible that some Neanderthals knew how to produce fire and some did not. Several studies make a good case for Neanderthals as self-starters. At the Pech de la site in France, researchers uncovered a collection of over 400 chunks of manganese dioxide. The substance had been found at other sites as well, and researchers had long believed it was used by Neanderthals as a body paint pigment. But the discovery at Pech de la had researchers proposing another use for the material. A substance used today in fireworks, manganese dioxide lowers the ignition temperature of wood by 100 degrees. A pinch of manganese dioxide powder sprinkled on a tinder pile makes it easier to start a fire. It's especially good for green wood. Another study analyzed flint tools called bifaces. Bifaces are hefty, handheld, teardrop-shaped tools featuring two worked sides with sharp edges ending in a point. Also called hand axes, they are versatile tools used to dig, butcher animals, chop wood, etc. But they may have had another use as well. In this study, researchers experimented with flint and pyrite, materials found in many Neanderthal sites. Inspired by later Mesolithic Homo sapiens of Eurasia, Greenland, and Alaska, who used flint and pyrite to start fires, researchers made precise flint biface replicas and tested the method, sparking several fires. They then examined the replicas alongside authentic Neanderthal flint bifaces from several sites. 20 of the Neanderthal bifaces matched the replicas, featuring visible and microscopic scratches and striations potentially caused by striking against pyrite. 8 more bifaces had been retouched by their owners for sharpening, and the process had eliminated some of the possible strike marks. I think this evidence makes a pretty solid case, but many experts aren't convinced, so the mystery continues. Whether they made fire or simply harnessed it, Neanderthals certainly used it, a lot, for cooking, warmth, light, and maybe even scaring off predators. A number of excavations uncovered Neanderthal hearths. Most resemble simple campfires, but several are more sophisticated. At the Abric Romani and Roca dels Bos sites in Spain, the hearths were situated within natural hollows, improving the retention of heat. In one level at Abric Romani, 5 small hearths were constructed in a line parallel to a wall with space on either side, likely so that 10 people could sleep warmly on either side and share fire-tending duties. In some sites, the fire pit was intentionally deepened, and sometimes large stones were placed by the fire, possibly to limit drafts. Abric Romani shows Neanderthals impressively controlling airflow into fire pits by digging small trenches. Modern experiments also show that many of the hearths were strategically placed for smoke dispersal, especially in caves. Some of their foods were likely eaten raw, but Neanderthals loved a barbecue. There is a catalog of evidence showing Neanderthals eating fire-roasted meat, seafood, and some seeds and nuts. Neanderthals regularly threw pine cones on the fire and then snacked on the roasted nuts. They may have also boiled foods. Some of their plant foods require roasting before they are edible, and some require soaking to remove compounds that aggravate the digestive tract. The Shanidar 3 dental calculus shows evidence of boiled starches. But if Neanderthals were boiling their food, we've been kept in the dark about their exact methods. There's no pottery in the Neanderthal fossil record. The oldest known pottery dates back to China, only 20,000 years ago. But you don't actually need a clay or metal pot to boil something. Experts have proposed various options such as the stomach or skin of an animal, a large animal skull, a tortoise shell, a naturally hollow stone, or even a wooden vessel. Using the proper technique, even flammable containers made of wood, animal hide, bamboo, and coconut shells can be used to boil water without the vessel catching fire, as long as the vessel is full of water. Another method is digging a pit in the ground and lining it, possibly with clay, stones, leaves, or animal skin, then filling it with water. Stones are heated in the fire and then transferred to the water-filled pit, heating the water to a boil. Modern-day experiments prove that Neanderthals had the components necessary to make it work. But did they have the knowledge or skills? We just don't have the evidence to say. Butchered animal bone fragments show that Neanderthals were crazy about bone marrow, cracking all the large bones to access the nutritious contents. Boiling bone marrow would make it even easier to consume. Neanderthal teeth reduced in size over 100,000 years, possibly as a result of improved cooking techniques and food becoming softer and more easily digestible. As we all know, what goes in must come out. And what comes out has also given us clues about Neanderthal diets. Yes, the fossil record includes Neanderthal poop. A considerate individual from the El Salt site in Spain left us a present 50,000 years ago that turned to stone, or rather, a type of fossil called a coprolite. This particular coprolite is the oldest known human poop. Analysis of the stool souvenir showed that the individual ate a combination of meat and plants. Imagine becoming famous 50,000 years after your death for that. Somewhere his wife is cringing. Number 6. Neanderthals had a better understanding of materials than we gave them credit for. The manufacture of birch bark tar shows us that Neanderthals had a better understanding of natural materials, even some primitive biology, chemistry, and physics, than we realized. This is evident in other disciplines as well. Example 1. The use of wood. On the floor of a coal pit in Schöningen, Germany, is a site referred to as the Spear Horizon. In this location, once the shore of an ancient lake, researchers discovered a collection of wooden spears. Due to decomposition, wooden artifacts of this age are spectacularly rare, making this find especially exciting. The spears were lying among the ancient bones of 35 butchered horses, possibly killed with these very implements. The wooden weapons included 9 spears, 1 lance, and a double-pointed throwing stick. Some of the spears were broken and slightly warped from environmental conditions, but they were extremely well preserved, still pointed, smooth, and displaying beautiful wood grain patterns. The surfaces still showed traces of cutting, scraping, and smoothing left by their makers. All of the spears were made from spruce, except one made from Scots pine. Analysis showed that they were all crafted from thin tree trunks, and the spear tips were carved at the stump end for maximum hardness. The 9 spears bear a remarkable resemblance to modern-day javelins, and not just in appearance. Researchers discovered that the spears were carved off-center, intentionally weighted toward the tips. The combination of 6-foot javelin-like spears, an 8-foot lance, and a 2-foot double-pointed stick indicate different uses for the weapons. Perhaps javelins for throwing and spearing big game from a distance, a lance for jabbing big game up close, and a smaller throwing stick for clubbing small game or driving larger game. Experts point out that the double tips of the small throwing stick were actually for flight trajectory, not for stabbing. Impact marks on the stick match those of other confirmed throwing sticks. Not long after the spears were dropped by Neanderthal hunters, the lake level rose and covered the area with soil, preserving the artifacts until they were rediscovered between 290 and 337,000 years later. Amazingly, the Schöningen spears are not even the oldest wooden spears in the archaeological record. The Clacton spear point is a foot-long, broken-off wooden spear tip discovered in Clacton-on-Sea in England. Dated to 400,000 years old, it is the oldest worked wooden artifact currently known. Likely produced with a curved flint tool, the spear was made of yew wood, a particularly hard wood famous for its use in European weapons in the Middle Ages. The Clacton spear point proves yew wood was being used for weapons in Europe much earlier than we realized. Long before Homo sapiens had even set foot in Europe. Neanderthal-made spears crafted from yew wood were also found at the Leringen site in Germany. At the Armbalza site in Italy, researchers found a yew wood digging stick dated to 90,000 years old. At the Poggetti Vecchi site in Italy, Neanderthals used boxwood, one of the hardest woods in Europe, to produce 47 out of the 55 wooden tools found at the site. A majority of the boxwood tools were digging sticks. They were dated to over 170,000 years old. Hearths at the Les Roselles site in France also showed the use of yew wood and Scots pine. Evidence shows that Neanderthals had a decent understanding of the properties of different woods and sought out certain trees and various parts of trees when producing specific items, which they then fine-tuned over time. Example 2. Cord making. The presence of beads, perforated shells, and bone awls in the fossil record make it clear that Neanderthals had cordage. Cord, made of rawhide or animal sinew, was most likely, but it's possible they also had fiber cord, and perhaps other fiber-based manufactured goods, such as bags, baskets, mats, and nets. Researchers suspected as much, but unfortunately the evidence just wasn't there. Either Neanderthals lacked the technology, or the fiber goods they had made had degraded to dust over tens of thousands of years. There was just no way of knowing. Until 2020, when an excavation in the Aubry de Maras site in southern France provided a new thread to hang on to, literally. While examining stone tools with reflected light microscopy, researchers discovered individual twisted plant fibers on the surface of several tools. Further screening revealed a fragment of string on one flake. The fragment is approximately 6.2 millimeters in length and 0.5 millimeters in width. Photomicrographs showed the string to be 3 fibers bundled with an S twist, then plied together with a Z twist, resulting in a 3-ply cord. This method has been used by Homo sapiens to produce cord since the Upper Paleolithic, and now it looks like Neanderthals used it even earlier. Yarn is still produced this way today. Testing revealed that the fibers were from the inner bark of a conifer tree. Charcoal and sediment analysis confirmed the presence of pine wood at the site. Homo sapiens also harvested fibers from pine, spruce, juniper, and cedar trees for cord manufacturing purposes. Found on the underside of a stone flake, the string may have once been attached to the tool's handle, cut by the tool, transferred to the tool while in a bag, or arrived some other way. We'll never know. The individual twisted fibers found on the surfaces of other stone tools from the site are likely associated, but researchers can't confirm them as cordage, since they are just single fibers and don't definitively display a yarn twining technique. The team has dated the string fragment to between 41 and 52,000 years old, making it the oldest evidence of fiber and textile technology to date. The next oldest are fiber fragments from the Ohala II site in Israel, dating to 19,000 years ago. They were produced by Homo sapiens. Neanderthals' knowledge of this technique makes more sophisticated fiber manufacturing even likelier. If you can take wood fibers off a tree and produce cordage, perhaps you can also weave that cord into more complex goods, like containers and fabric, etc. Even more impressive is the knowledge of trees required to harvest the fibers. The inner bark of many trees has a fibrous layer called bast. For fiber use, bast must be harvested in the spring as sap in the tree begins to rise. Too late in the year and the bast has hardened into bark. Once removed, the bast must be separated from the bark, commonly by beating, then soaked, and separated into strands that will then be twined into cordage. And a lot of cordage is needed when manufacturing even the simplest items like rope and baskets. Experts also point out the cognitive ability required to keep track of pairs and sets in the sequential operation of cord production, indicating that Neanderthals had at least a basic counting or numerical ability. Pretty impressive, isn't it? Example 3. Hideworking. At 2 sites in southwest France, Pestalozzi Cave and Aubry-Peyroney, researchers have found 5 fragments of a special bone tool called a lissois. All the fragments are identical, just the smooth, rounded tip of the tool, likely broken off while in use. French for smoother, lissoirs are used to work animal hides and make them more supple, shiny, and water-resistant. The tools are still used by leatherworkers to this day. These 5 fragments date to between 41 and 51,000 years ago, and are evidence that Neanderthals were burnishing hides in the Middle Paleolithic in Europe, probably before the arrival of Homo sapiens. Collagen tests of the lissois fragments show that the tools were made from the rib bones of bison and aurochs, an ancient cow. Evidence shows that the individuals sought out bison bones despite the quantity of reindeer bones available. Rib bones were likely selected because of their length, great for grasping with both hands, and the minimal shaping required to develop a rounded end. Bone is also more flexible than stone and less likely to snap under pressure. Microscopic analysis shows abrasions on the tool fragments consistent with hideworking. Even more amazing is the new data gleaned from artifacts found at the Castel di Guido site in Italy. The site was once a watering hole for the now extinct straight-tusked elephant. Many elephants died there, and Neanderthals used their bones to produce tools, 98 of which were found at the site. Along with the elephant bone tools, researchers found a single artifact carved from aurochs bone. The tool was identified as a hide smoother, or lissois. Dating revealed it to be an extraordinary 400,000 years old. Some Neanderthals may have also tanned hides. Tanning turns rawhide into leather by treating it with tannin, a natural acidic compound commonly found in some tree bark and many other plants. Tanning isn't required when processing hides, but it does make them more durable, more water-resistant, and less likely to discolor and decompose. It can also dye the hide different natural shades, depending on the color of the hide and the tannin source. A small flint scraper found at the Neumarkt site in Germany has on its surface residue of a tanning decoction made of oak bark. The scraper was used for hide working and once bore a wooden handle that had since rotted away. The tanning residue accumulated under the handle and hardened over time. Oak bark is the most common source of tannin for leather production in Europe, going back centuries. In fact, the English surname Barker originated with workers who were hired to strip bark off trees and deliver them to leather tanneries. The tannin-coated flake at Neumarkt shows that this tradition goes back much further than anyone realized. What's fascinating is that Neanderthals seem to know, over 100,000 years ago, where to find the best material for the task, one still used today. In our day and age, these items seem very low-tech, but how many people do you know right now that can craft baskets from bark, make tar from trees, and turn reindeer into raincoats? Number 7. There is evidence that some Neanderthals buried their dead, especially babies. The knowledge that many Neanderthals cared for their injured, disabled, and elderly gives us a new perspective on how they might have cared for their dead. We've seen evidence that a member's value in the group extends beyond pure utility and is amplified by love, loyalty, respect, ritual. We can't say for sure. And does it extend into death? We don't know for certain, but perhaps we have clues. At the La Ferricie rock shelter in southern France, researchers unearthed the remains of at least 7 Neanderthal individuals, 2 adults, 3 young children, and 2 babies. La Ferricie 1, a 50-year-old male, is one of the most complete Neanderthal skeletons in the fossil record. His skull is the most complete Neanderthal skull in the world to date, and replicas of it are featured in museums around the world. Some experts say the skeleton's impressive condition after tens of thousands of years hints at an intentional burial, likely immediately after death before any decomposition, exposure to the elements, or damage from animals could occur. LF1 was dated to between 40 and 54,000 years old. The skeleton of La Ferricie 2, a 25 to 30-year-old female, is not as complete, but her hands and feet are remarkable. Nearly every bone in her hands is present, and one of her feet has all bones still assembled, encased in a block of sediment. La Ferricie 1 and 2 were discovered resting in 2 adjacent spots. According to their discoverers, they were head-to-head, 18 inches apart, but facing opposite directions. Their heads were at higher elevations than the rest of their bodies. The skeletons of the 5 children are more fragmentary. They are known as LF3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. In order of age, they are a 10-year-old whose remains consist of a partial skeleton, a 3 to 5-year-old with a nearly complete skeleton, a 2-year-old with remains and fragments but very well-preserved teeth, a 12-day-old newborn with a partial skeleton, and a 7-month fetus. LF3 and 4, the 10-year-old and the 12-day-old newborn, were resting less than 4 feet apart. They lay in separate bowl-shaped pits. LF5 and 8, the 7-month fetus and the 2-year-old, were lying less than 7 feet apart in separate pits. LF6, the 3 to 5-year-old, rested alone in a large pit to the right of the others. Most of the bodies were oriented east-west. LF1, 3, and 5 were all found with both legs bent and angled to the right. LF5, the 7-month fetus, lay in a pit beneath what was described as a mound, the northernmost in a series of 9 evenly spaced mounds. The other 8 mounds were excavated, but no other remains were found. Discoverers also described other pits and depressions that did not contain remains. Stone items were also unearthed that discoverers claimed were grave goods. 3 flint scrapers were found in the grave of the 7-month fetus, LF5. Above the remains of the 3 to 5-year-old LF6 was a large limestone chunk. One side of the rock was engraved with 18 small cup-like depressions, with 16 of the depressions displayed as pairs. The carved side of the rock lay face down on the grave. What is being depicted on the limestone engraving is a mystery, but experts agree that the decoration is man-made. From early on, the Laferisi site was viewed by many as a collection of deliberate burials, whether in dugout trenches or natural depressions, intentionally covered over with earth. Other experts were dubious, believing the burial was simply the work of nature and time. They pointed out the instability of the surroundings and suggested that the burial, and possibly even the deaths, could have been the result of shifting soil and rock. Most experts dismissed the limestone chunk and flints as grave goods, saying they were likely just items deposited in the soil that made their way into the graves by chance. A number of other engraved rocks were found at Laferisi, including 20 with cut marks, but are dated to a later period and attributed to Homo sapiens. Debates over Laferisi have been raging for nearly a century. However, a recent study has strengthened the case for intentional burial. In 2020, researchers at the French National Center for Scientific Research revisited material collected in a 1970s excavation and discovered 47 new bones belonging to LF8, the 2-year-old boy or girl. Conducting further studies at the site, they determined that the remains were lying in an angled layer that ran in a different direction as the surrounding sediments. The angle allowed the child's head to be elevated and the body to be oriented east-west like the other skeletons. The bones had been found in anatomical position, suggesting that they lay undisturbed since first placed there. Furthermore, the sediments in which the child was buried were younger than the surrounding sediments at the same depth, indicating that it was grave-filling dirt. The toddler's bones also showed a high degree of preservation when compared to animal bones from the site, suggesting that the remains were purposely buried immediately after death. Dating revealed the bones to be 41,000 years old. Amazingly, this means that LF8 is one of the most recent Neanderthals we have in the fossil record. North of Aleppo, Syria, lies the Dedaria Cave, where, in a series of excavations beginning in 1993, a team unearthed the remains of numerous Neanderthals, possibly as many as 15 individuals. Over half of them were young children. A majority of the remains are fragmentary, but amazingly, the cave yielded 2 well-preserved skeletons of Neanderthal infants. The first child, called Dedaria 1, was found lying on its back, arms at its sides, but slightly outward with legs flexed. The skeleton was nearly complete, with the exception of facial bones, and despite being brittle, the bones were in excellent condition. Dental analysis revealed that the child was around 2 years old. The presence of even the tiniest bones and a high degree of articulation in the skeleton hinted at intentional burial. A limestone block was situated inches from the crown of the child's head in the same layer. Discoverers called the block pillow-like, though we cannot know if it was used for that purpose. A small flint tool lay among his ribs and vertebrae. The tool may have been placed on the child's chest, or it could have simply gotten there by chance from the soil, which did contain flint fragments. The pit containing D1's body was circular, 8 feet in diameter and almost 5 feet deep. The second child, called Dedaria 2, had a partial skeleton. Analysis shows him or her to be under 2 years old. The child rested in a 70 centimeter long, 25 centimeter deep pit in the 3rd stratigraphic layer. Along with the child's remains, the pit was filled with fine brown sediment and yielded 14 flints, numerous animal bone fragments, and a large fragment of tortoise shell. Experts don't know if the items were placed there intentionally or were simply part of the soil covering the child. A number of hearths were present in the same layer, showing numerous occupations of the cave, possibly building up a lot of debris and discarded items in the soil. Mezmaiskaya Cave is located in the northern Caucasus in the Russian Republic of Adygaya. In the cave, researchers discovered the skeletal remains of 2 Neanderthal babies, as well as the tooth of a 3rd child. The first child found, Mezmaiskaya 1, was a 2-week-old newborn. Its tiny skeleton was mostly complete, with some damage to the facial bones. Much of the body remained in anatomical position, though the legs had been displaced later, likely due to changes in the surrounding sediment. The child was found lying on its right side, its left arm bent towards its chest, knees flexed, and legs drawn up. The bone was so well preserved that even the child's tiny tooth buds were still visible. While there was no evidence of a pit, the sediments immediately surrounding the newborn were small charcoal fragments not found elsewhere. The baby's posture was curious, since newborns don't roll over on their own until at least 2 months. It appeared that some other means or someone had left the child in this position, almost resembling a nap. Aside from some rodent nibbling on the leg bones, the remains showed no evidence of damage from scavengers or weathering from the elements. Indirect dating provided an age of between 60 and 70,000 years old. The second child found, Mesmaske U2, was a 1 to 2-year-old boy, determined through DNA analysis. His remains consisted of 24 cranial fragments. They were recovered from a small pit 40 centimeters long and 50 centimeters deep. It was impossible to determine if the pit was naturally formed or purposely dug. A limestone block was laid atop the pit. Researchers do not know if the block was placed there intentionally or arrived there through natural means. The boy's remains were directly dated to between 42,960 and 44,600 years old. Evidence of a third child, a single baby tooth, was also found in the cave. DNA testing showed it belonged to a female Neanderthal between 5 and 6 years old. While it's possible that the tooth was part of disintegrated or undiscovered skeletal remains, it could also have been discarded in the cave by a living child who simply lost her baby tooth. The tooth was dated to between 90 and 100,000 years old. The Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq is situated amid rugged cliffs at an elevation of 2,400 feet. Providing panoramic views and protection, the cave is the perfect prehistoric shelter, and possibly a mausoleum. In the cave, researchers have unearthed the remains of 11 Neanderthals. 8 were adults, 5 men aged between 30 and 50 years old, and 2, possibly 3, adult women. The remaining 3 were babies, an infant, a 9-month-old, and a 1 to 2-year-old. Individuals named 1, 2, 3, and 5 didn't provide many burial clues. The others, however, raise a lot of interesting questions. Shanidar 4 is a 30 to 45-year-old male. He was found on his left side in partial fetal position, nestled in a rocky niche. His left hand was close to his face. Analysis of the soil surrounding S4 show pollen from many different plants. This led experts to believe he'd been buried with flowers, possibly as part of a funeral rite. For decades, Shanidar 4 was referred to as the flower burial. However, new research has revealed the presence of Persian jurds, rodents that dwell underground and store flowers and seeds in their burrows. The pollen in the soil around Shanidar 4 is likely from that natural source. Because Shanidar 4 was so fragile, the excavation team decided to relocate him when he was still encased in a block of sediment. As they dug around his skeleton, they discovered more remains right below him, 2 adult females and an infant. They became known as Shanidar 6, 8, and 9. The skeletons were so close that the bones intermingled, suggesting that they were buried together. It's possible that the infant buried with the man and 2 women belonged to one of them, but only DNA analysis can answer that, if samples can be obtained. Upper body remains, likely belonging to one of the adult females, were found in a position remarkably similar to S4. She was lying partly on her left side, her right arm flexed across her rib cage and fingers tightly clenched. Her left arm was bent with her hand clasped and tucked under her chin, as if asleep. A stone flake tool was found among her ribs. Interestingly, in the overlying layer, no other such artifacts were present. 2 stones, one on top of the other, sat near the remains. They were incongruous with the surrounding stones and sediment. The upper stone was triangular and distinctive. Its proximity to specific bones indicated that it may have been placed behind the skull. The individual was a middle-aged adult, based on dental analysis. Recent fieldwork reinforces that S4, 6, 8, and 9, the man, 2 women, and infant, were placed in a channel in the floor of the cave that was originally created by water, but then deepened by digging. Sediment analysis supports this. A dark brown silt surrounded some of the bones, made up of plant tissue fragments and a red-brown phosphatic material that researchers suspect is disintegrated human bone and soft tissue. If confirmed, this could be further evidence of an intentional burial soon after death, where all or most decomposition occurred after burial. Analysis of the plant materials could bolster or further debunk the flower burial theory, or simply bring new evidence to light. This group of 4 Neanderthals, clustered together, some in similar positions, some still articulated, resting in a grave with man-made features, makes a very compelling case for intentional burial. Researchers believe that a further 12th individual could be lying in the sediment immediately beneath where S4, 6, 8, and 9 were unearthed. Further excavations are planned. Shanidar 7, a 9-month-old baby, was found some distance away from the S4 group. He or she was lying in situ with arms and legs flexed. Enough of the right hand remained to show that the fingers had been closed. The skull faced upward but was crushed. The skeleton was still articulated, and it was evident that its remains had never been disturbed. A small block of limestone and a chunk of charcoal lay at the baby's left heel. A large flint was 2 inches from the skull, and mammal bone fragments near the child's knee. However, it cannot be determined if these were placed there or were just part of the soil. The surrounding sediments did contain bone, charcoal, flint, and limestone fragments. It's clear that Shanidar Cave was a very special place for Neanderthals, whether they used it for burial or not. Evidence indicates that Neanderthals used the cave for over 120,000 years. And, as it turns out, so did ancient Homo sapiens. In the upper layers of the Shanidar Cave, before finding the Neanderthal remains, the original excavation team discovered a proto-Neolithic cemetery. It contained the remains of over 35 Homo sapiens and numerous grave goods. It was dated to over 10,600 years old. Since research is ongoing, more information and possibly more remains will likely be revealed in coming years. Excavations in the Amaze cave in northeast Israel yielded the remains of 19 Neanderthal individuals. 6 of them were adults. 12 were children, including 8 babies, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an 8-year-old. While it's possible that some or all of them were intentionally buried, only 2 of the graves provide that evidence today. Amaze 1, a 25-year-old male, has a complete skeleton, still articulated, and was found lying on his left side in a fetal position. He was buried below the cave's drip line. Amaze 7, a 10-month-old baby, has a still articulated partial skeleton. The child was found resting on its right side, situated in a natural niche in the cave wall, the body lying directly on bedrock. Lying on the child's pelvis was the jawbone of a large red deer. Experts cannot say whether this object is a grave good, ritual item, or is there by chance. Red deer bones were found elsewhere in the cave, but only in fragments, not complete bones. Both Amaze 1 and 7 were oriented with heads pointing northwest. These are just a few of the cases researchers have identified as intentional Neanderthal burials, though some experts are still dubious. I encourage you to investigate for yourself and see what you think. Number 8. It's very likely Neanderthals had spoken language, possibly similar to ours. In 1983, in the Kebara Cave in Israel, researchers found the partial skeleton of a Neanderthal male. Named Kebara 2, this skeleton generated an even bigger buzz than usual. His were the first Neanderthal remains found with a hyoid bone present. All vertebrate animals with jaws have a hyoid bone in some form, but in mammals, the bone is unusually mobile to allow for suckling milk and chewing food. In humans, the hyoid is a U-shaped bone situated in the front of the throat, below the lower jaw and above the thyroid cartilage of the larynx. Its unique shape, position, and level of mobility helps to control tongue movement and aids in speech. As the only bone in the human body not connected to other bones, the hyoid bone is easily separated from skeletal remains once soft tissues decompose. It's also fragile, highly susceptible to disintegration after long periods of time and exposure to elements. Therefore, it was exciting to find Kavara 2's 60,000-year-old hyoid bone. Experts weren't sure Neanderthals had them, as they hadn't found one yet. However, since then, more have been found in the El Cedrón and Cima de los Huesos caves in Spain. Analysts were astonished to discover that all the Neanderthal hyoid bones, ranging in age between 60,000 and 430,000 years old, were nearly identical to those of modern humans. Studies showed that all specimens fell within the shape and size range of Homo sapiens. This is remarkable considering that chimps and bonobos, our closest living relatives, do not match our hyoid size and shape. No living animal does. A matching shape and size do not guarantee that Neanderthal hyoid bones function just like ours, or were located in the same place, but it does give us more to work with. A recent study used computer models to reconstruct and test hyoid musculature at the fiber level, following the microscopic architecture of Neanderthal and Homo sapien hyoid bones. They found that the biomechanics of the Neanderthal hyoids matched Homo sapiens, meaning they functioned similarly. Considering the hyoid bone impacts the tongue's position relative to the hard palate, this does suggest more sophisticated speech abilities in Neanderthals than we gave them credit for. Another study used scans of Neanderthal and Homo sapien skulls and hyoid bones to generate the most probable design of the Neanderthal vocal tract and its position. Results showed a larger larynx than Homo sapiens, but smaller than the space required for an air sac, the laryngeal structure of all other living great apes, excluding humans. This laryngeal difference between us and our closest living relatives was likely essential to the evolution of spoken language. Using the simulated Neanderthal vocal tracts, the team tested their acoustic properties and found that they produced a range of vowel sounds. Because the simulated Neanderthal larynx was larger than that of Homo sapiens, some of their vowel sounds matched ours and some differed. Unfortunately, these are just evidence-based simulations. Since we don't have any soft tissue structures from Neanderthals, we can't definitively say how their larynges looked or functioned. But all the vowels and consonants in the world are useless if you don't have the anatomy to hear them. A 2021 study used CT scans of Neanderthal and Homo sapien skulls to create virtual 3D models of ear structures and estimate their hearing abilities. Even though Neanderthal ear bones are morphologically distinct from ours, results showed that Neanderthal's frequency range closely resembled that of modern humans and included the frequency range of human speech sounds. The study also suggests that Neanderthal hearing was optimized for consonants, such as TH, T, F, K, and S, just like Homo sapien hearing. The capacity for spoken language may go even deeper, to the genetic level. Thanks to DNA sequencing, we now know that Neanderthals carry the human-specific variants of the FOXP2 gene, sharing these variants only with humans. The FOXP2 gene is found in many other vertebrate animals, giving some birds the ability to mimic and sing, and bats their echolocation skills. In humans, FOXP2 plays a role in speech and language development. People with mutations in this gene suffer from developmental verbal dyspraxia, a condition that impairs the brain's ability to move the tongue, lips, and jaw for speech. FOXP2 has been dubbed the language gene, but experts point out that several other genes and numerous other factors impact our capacity for language. Many experts believe that Neanderthal technology is a clue they had spoken language. Neanderthals made stone tools using a particular technique called levallois. Because it was so difficult to learn, most experts believe the levallois methods were taught to each new generation by the previous, passing the knowledge along again and again for over 200,000 years. And, as we mentioned earlier, Neanderthals had the ability to manufacture goods from trees and animals, use resources such as bitumen, etc. Could all of this knowledge and expertise be passed along without speech? And how does a Neanderthal guy impress a Homo sapien girl without words? Neanderthal and Homo sapien genomes show interbreeding, so much so that it still shows up in the genes of most humans today. This wasn't a rare or isolated incident. It was widespread. So, did cavemen have pickup lines? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 9. Caveman Kin, moving evidence of Neanderthal families. DNA analysis breathes new life into ancient bones, conjuring up long dead, long forgotten people and telling us more about who they were and where they came from. This is especially meaningful when it comes to understanding Neanderthal families and relationships. We've only just scratched the surface, but what we've found so far is fascinating. Meet Denny. Officially named Denisova 11, Denny is a 13-year-old girl who lived over 90,000 years ago in what we now call Russia. This one small bone fragment, shown here from 6 different angles, is all that we currently have of her remains. At 2 inches long, it's probably part of an arm or leg bone. It was found in 2012 in the Denisova cave in Siberia, a gold mine of ancient human and animal remains. It's unknown whether Denny died in this cave or her remains were brought here through human, animal, or natural means. What we do know is that the Denisova cave has been used as a shelter for hundreds of thousands of years by animals and at least 3 human species, 2 of which are now extinct: Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens. Denisovans especially favored this cave. Only 8 Denisovan individuals have been discovered by scientists so far, and 6 of them were found in the Denisova cave, with dates spanning between 51,000 and 285,000 years ago. Because Denisovans are so rare, Denny is already very special. But recent DNA analysis proved her to be spectacularly special. Denny is a Denisovan Neanderthal hybrid. Her mother was a Neanderthal and her father was a Denisovan. This means that Denny is one person, but part of 2 distinct archaic human species. As the only first-generation hominin hybrid yet found, Denny's discovery was either a 1 in a million find, or there were more hybrids around than we thought. Interestingly, Denny's DNA also shows that her Denisovan father had a little splash of Neanderthal ancestry too, 300 to 600 generations before his own lifetime. Analysts also learned that Denny's mother was more closely related to Neanderthals of Western Europe than to other Neanderthals found in the same Siberian cave, who were Central Eurasian. This gives us a clue about Neanderthal migration patterns. In the last decade, DNA revealed that Homo sapiens had offspring with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and now, thanks to Denny, we know that Neanderthals and Denisovans had offspring too. Denny had a sadly short life, but now she's part of history and giving us answers about her people and ours 90,000 years later. That's quite an achievement. Next, we'll meet the Chigurskaya clans, 2 families living over 54,000 years ago, staying, possibly for the last time, in the Chigurskaya cave in what is now Siberia. Their remains were discovered in the cave along with 5 others. Though the bones were fragmentary, they provided a wealth of genetic evidence. To keep the families straight, I'm referring to them as Clan 1 and 2. Clan 1 consisted of an adult male, Chigurskaya D, and his adolescent daughter, Chigurskaya H. The family included 2 more adult males, Chigurskaya C and E, related to the father through his maternal line, possibly his cousins. Here is an artistic representation of D and his daughter H, done by Tom Björklund, a scientific and historic illustrator from Finland. He does amazing illustrations of Ice Age people. Clan 2 consisted of Chigurskaya L, an adult female, and Chigurskaya A, a 9 to 15-year-old boy. They were second-degree relatives, either cousins, an aunt and nephew, or a grandmother and her grandson. Neanderthal groups are estimated to be between 10 and 30 people, so it's likely these clans had more members, both related and not, that we don't have evidence for. Since the evidence we do have is fragmentary, we don't know how these individuals died or how they ended up where they were found. What is clear is that these Neanderthal bands included families, something experts suspected but couldn't confirm due to limited data. And, considering that just 1/3 of the Chigurskaya cave has been excavated, and only 25% of the found Neanderthal remains have been analyzed, researchers expect more exciting data and discoveries, including, possibly, finding the teenage girl's mother. Next, we'll meet the El Sidron sisters-in-law. In the El Sidron cave in Spain, researchers found the remains of 13 Neanderthal individuals, 3 adult males, 4 adult females, and 6 children between 2 and 15 years old. 3 males, 1 female, and 2 indeterminate. Unfortunately, full genome sequencing has not or could not be performed, possibly due to insufficient samples, and thus full parental lineage could not be determined. However, mitochondrial DNA analysis, which identifies only maternal lineage, was performed. It confirmed the group as a family unit. The 3 adult males were related in the maternal line. They are either brothers, cousins, or uncles and nephews under the same grandmother. One of the adult females and 3 of the children were also related to each other and the adult males. Another of the adult females is likely the mother of the 2 youngest children, age 2 and 5. She is also related to one of the 12 to 15-year-olds. Since she's young, it's likely her sibling or cousin. Interestingly, 3 of the adult females are from non-related maternal lineages. This means they aren't related to the men or each other. This suggests that some Neanderthals participated in patrilocal mating, a behavior where women move out of their own group to join the group of their husband and his family. This theory is also supported by the Chigurskaya Neanderthals. Their genomes revealed a much greater genetic diversity in the mitochondrial DNA, which shows maternal lineage, than of the Y chromosomes, passed from father to son. This shows a pattern of females leaving their families and bands for coupling, while males stayed put. The exact reason is impossible to know. Perhaps it was due to established hunting grounds, bands, and camps used by the males. It's probably a lot easier to transport or reestablish the feminine tasks than to find new shelter and food sources. Also, women likely integrate more easily into a family, hence the 3 sisters-in-law at El Sidron. Or the women might have been traded or captured from other bands. Sadly, the patrilocal mating practice didn't provide enough genetic diversity for the El Sidron family. They had a high degree of inbreeding, and many individuals suffered from medical issues because of it. Next, we'll meet the beachcombers. Long before the Allies landed at Normandy, an army of Neanderthal children stormed the beaches. On a beautiful beach near Les Roselles, the children left their tracks in sandy mud flow that hardened and was quickly buried under windblown sand. Today, 80,000 years later, hundreds of their prints still remain. Since the 1960s, researchers have uncovered 257 footprints and 8 handprints made by 10 to 13 individuals. They were mostly children and adolescents, with the youngest at around 2 years old. It's possible that the few adult prints belong to a fully grown adolescent or an adult accompanying the group. Experts identified the prints as Neanderthal due to their characteristic shape, wider, especially at the midfoot, with a lower arch. Archaeological evidence also supports the presence of Neanderthals. In the area, within the same layers, researchers found hearths, stone tool production areas, and butchery operations attributed to the species. Also, Homo sapiens could be ruled out because they wouldn't arrive on the continent for another 40,000 years. Incidentally, all 8 handprints show a right hand. 2 of the handprints show fingerprints. Experts have also noted the lack of clear toe impressions on some of the complete footprints, suggesting they may be shod feet. While no direct remains of foot coverings are known for Neanderthals, 1 or 2 other sites also suggest it. It remains a possibility considering they traveled vast distances over rugged terrain. Since we don't have any DNA for the Les Roselles beachcombers, we can't say for sure they were family, but other evidence suggests this. Testing shows that the footprints were made at the same time. Combined with evidence of a camp in the same layers, it seems very likely the children were part of the same group, and thus related by blood or relationships. They could have even been members of 2 or more friendly groups who hunted and camped together, and the kids joined together to play on the beach. It's also possible that the children were hunting for food or resources. The archaeological record indicates that even young children were given responsibilities, such as gathering food and butchering small animals. 6 animal tracks were found at the site. They were attributed to a deer, a feline, a canine, and a member of the weasel family. The children may have teamed up to follow the tracks, scavenge for dead fish, collect shellfish, perhaps even hunt seabirds. Or they were simply exploring the beach with their siblings, cousins, and friends, just like today. Another, remarkably similar scene was discovered in 2020 along the Spanish coast at Mar de las Cañas. Recent storms had lashed the beaches and scoured away sand, revealing ancient footprints impressed in sandstone that had been hidden for over 295,000 years. So far, researchers have discovered over 300 footprints, likely belonging to 36 individuals, including 11 children and 25 adults, 15 of which were adolescents. The youngest child appears to be around 6 years old. A majority of the footprints are perpendicular to the shoreline, moving southwest and northeast, advancing and retreating from the pools. They're on the edge of a flooded area, but don't wade too far into it, indicating that the group may have been stalking animals in the water, fishing, or searching for shellfish. Several of the child footprints were chaotic, reminiscent of kids running and jumping in the sand. Morphology and dating show the group to be early Neanderthals, or Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals' progenitor. Animal tracks were also present, including auroch, deer, wild boar, and seabirds, showing an appealing hunting spot for ancient humans. So, as it turns out, ancient Neanderthal families aren't that different from ours today. Surprising paternity results, in-laws that don't leave, rowdy kids, and apparently, lots of love. Number 10. Neanderthals live on in us. We've studied our ancient cousins for 200 years, but only in the last decade have we really begun to understand them. We now know that Neanderthals were clever, resilient, skilled, and often caring, similar to us in so many ways, perhaps even teaching us a few things. But why then did Neanderthals go extinct, while we flourished and spread across the planet? Experts just don't know for sure. Some say we drove them to extinction through conflict or competition for resources, or both. Maybe our brains were developing in ways theirs weren't, giving us the cognitive ability to create better technology or communicate more effectively, or some other survival advantage. Other experts suggest disease or fertility problems. Genomic data shows low Neanderthal populations, making a rampant disease even more devastating. Low population also resulted in low genetic diversity and a higher level of inbreeding that likely caused reproductive issues. It was known to have caused birth defects and diminished fitness. Some researchers cite changing climate as a primary or secondary extinction factor. Neanderthals did stick it out through hundreds of thousands of years, including through several glacial periods in Europe and Asia. But perhaps at a certain point, the conditions became too much for an already vulnerable population. Or maybe it was just bad luck. Homo sapiens have gotten close to extinction a few times, and we can't discount the role luck has played in our survival. But there is one contributor to Neanderthal extinction that we do have evidence for, and that evidence is inside us right now. Research shows that 20% of gene variants that are distinctly Neanderthal still exist today in the Homo sapien gene pool. Factors like if we have some, how much we have, and how it is expressed in our bodies is different for everyone. But according to current data, 80% of all living humans today have between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. Living proof that between 47 and 65,000 years ago, you had a Homo sapien grandparent and a Neanderthal grandparent that made a baby, and thousands of generations later, you were born. To see how much Neanderthal DNA you have, you can buy genetic testing services from a company that offers Neanderthal ancestry tests. Not surprisingly, ancient Homo sapien genomes have an even higher percentage of Neanderthal DNA. A 46,000-year-old Homo sapien man found in the Bacho Kiro cave in Bulgaria had a Neanderthal great-great-great-great-grandparent. 2 other Homo sapien men found in the same cave, dated to between 42 and 45,000 years old, had Neanderthal grandparents 7 generations back. A Homo sapien man found at the Oase site in Romania dated to between 37 and 42,000 years old, had a Neanderthal relative 4 to 6 generations back. This evidence further strengthens the hypothesis that Neanderthals didn't go extinct at all, but were simply absorbed into Homo sapien populations, which were much larger, and possibly better equipped for survival in a changing world. As a small segment of a larger human population, Neanderthal genomes would be dispersed and diminished over time by the more numerous and diverse Homo sapien genomes. After tens of thousands of years, only bits and pieces remain within us, but what's still present has told us a lot about Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, then and now. In the human gene pool today, experts have identified Neanderthal gene variants that may have helped ancient Homo sapiens adapt to harsh and unfamiliar environments in Europe and Asia, such as body clock genes that possibly helped us cope with longer, darker winters, keratin-related genes that affect how hair, nails, and skin are made, perhaps helping us adjust from warm, sunny, tropical climates to dark, cold environments, human leukocyte antigens that provide immunity to local pathogens, helping Homo sapiens be more protected against pathogens in Eurasia that they hadn't encountered in Africa. Quicker blood clotting, which may have contributed to faster healing and a lower risk of infection. A progesterone receptor that increases fertility and makes women less likely to miscarry or bleed when pregnant. A recent study shows that 1 in 3 European women today carry this gene variant. Genes that govern how fats move into cells. While it gives us a greater risk of type 2 diabetes now, back in paleo diet times, it might have kept you from starving. And because everything has a downside, Neanderthal gene variants also contribute to human health issues such as an increased risk of lupus, celiac disease, Crohn's disease, cirrhosis, type 2 diabetes, and actinic keratosis, scaly skin patches from sun overexposure. And because breeding is a two-way street, Homo sapiens also gave some of their unique DNA to Neanderthals, which can be seen in Neanderthal genomes. You're welcome, guys. Experts can't say for sure if DNA Homo sapiens contributed to the Neanderthal gene pool was helpful, neutral, or harmful, or if it was expressed the same way in Neanderthals as it had been in humans. However, a recent study suggests a particular Homo sapien chromosome impacted Neanderthals in a big way. A new study comparing Y chromosomes in ancient humans revealed that between 38 and 53,000 years ago, Neanderthals transitioned from having a Denisovan-style Y chromosome to a Homo sapien-style Y chromosome. These results also tell us that Neanderthals and early modern humans began interacting and interbreeding much earlier than we believed, between 100,000 and 370,000 years ago, even before the historical migrations of Homo sapiens out of Africa. This means that some populations of Homo sapiens were in Eurasia much earlier than expected. Because Neanderthals and Homo sapiens are genetically intertwined, every new thing we learn about them fills in a missing piece for us too. In just the last 20 years, long-held beliefs about Homo sapien biology, history, migration patterns, technology, and more have changed. Ancient bones, fossils, artifacts, art, and dwellings that remained a mystery for millennia can now be identified as Homo sapien, enriching our history. We've also been challenged about what makes us human. Is it language, technology, culture, compassion? It appears these aren't uniquely Homo sapien traits, as we once thought. Given all we've learned, perhaps it's time to stop viewing Neanderthals as brutes and start viewing them as brothers. We did it 50,000 years ago, so why not today?